Okie dokie. Let's see if I can connect to it on YouTube, which is not. There it goes. Okay. Going to be doing a little setup for 3D printing today. That's right. You can see in front of you the figure I made. I'm trying to get it to print. To be completely honest, and it's not a one-click solution. 3D printing. I'm just going to say it out loud because there's pitfalls everywhere you go. So when you do 3D printing, what you want to do is set up that scaffold around the figure so that it can actually print. There we go. There we go. So you have to build a scaffold around the figure that you made. And yeah, it's kind of complicated. It can get kind of crazy sometimes. And what you don't want to, so this print's probably going to take 12 to 15 hours to print, maybe 12 hours. I'm hoping 12 hours. So what you want is to have, you don't want to get the print in 12 hours and then it's all half melted, right? Because you wasted all that time, right? This is not hard to, if you don't get it the first time, you get it after you print it, right? You understand this is just a waste of time unless you set it up. So what you do is you have to build the scaffolding system around your 3D model. And that way, it will support itself while it prints. And if you do it right, it'll work, which it usually does work. I'm just going to say, but the first time I started doing 3D printing, it was quite the challenge. And I had weeks of not being able to get it to do it correctly. So I've gotten a lot better at this. A lot of times you can do these supports are super thick. You can change the thickness of this kind of stuff. And so I've learned that that doesn't work for me. Usually these thinner supports work. And things like this string, which I've made extra thick. And by the way, I printed one. If you can sort of see it on screen. Let's see if I can get it there. Yeah, there you go. You can sort of see it right there. So yeah, you can sort of see. Yeah, it actually worked. There you go. Bang! Wow. So it worked. The 3D printing worked. Making this, and it looks great, right? This crossbow looks pretty sweet. But that is not a thing. That's a thing you have to dial in, the thickness of those strings. And you can sort of see, there it goes. There it goes. Good. So anyway, so I'm in the process now of doing that and making sure that this thing is going to print and it's going to print in a way that works. When you 3D print, it's going to print from the bottom. It's going to print like a pancake, layer by layer by layer, right? So if you're like that when I printed the crossbow, it took an hour because it was just a test. But the crossbow only went up to a very low bar kind of thing. So the higher your model goes, the longer it's going to take to print, right? That's pretty simple to grasp. Let me see if I can in the chat. Anybody want to jump on? That's cool. So yeah, right now, I mean, I think this is going to take about 12 hours. As a matter of fact, let me save it while it's looking good. Save up models. And I've done multiple versions of this. Last night, it totally melted down on me. So I woke up this morning and the print was completely, it looked like it didn't even print half the guy. It was basically this thin layer on the bottom. So what I actually want to end up doing is I didn't actually have this kind of like this thing on the bottom. It's like a plate. I didn't have that done. I didn't, for some reason, last night around like 11 o'clock, I was super tired and I didn't do it. I'm like, what the fuck? Right? So I get up and it's all screwed up. So anyway, I'll just kind of show you quickly how it works. Oh, it looks like there we go. All right. Let's remove them. I'm going to just show you how it kind of does it. Boom, there you go. So that's the model with no supports or anything. And that's as big as I can get. This little blue box that you see represents the size of my 3D printer. Right? So oh, don't move. It's going to be 193. You can't see because of this freaking camera. It's going to be almost 200 millimeters long, right? So that's roughly 7.5 inches or something like that, I think. Let's see if I can show you this. I printed this guy, printed him once, and I was going to print him with the pegs that I would put into the base, right? I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Just basically, I could print the base separately and then him separately and then put them together. It didn't, it didn't work. And the amount of material and time needed to print a separate base was massive. It was like, don't even bother doing this. This is going to bankrupt you. So I had to come up with a different solution. And so anyway, so here's kind of how the supports work in 3D printing, because everybody should need to know this, right, in life. You can do it manually. You can just go around and add little supports here and there, and this is a way that you're going to help support it while it's printed. But it's kind of, this is crazy town. If you're going to go this route, right? So the way I like to do it is I use this feature that can add, it'll go through a process of adding all the supports that it thinks it needs, right? And then I add the ones that I think I need on top of that. And if you're not into 3D printing and you don't really want to see how the sausage is made, I get it. It's totally, you just want your cool thing. I mean, that's really what it's about, but I also recognize that a lot of people don't have any idea how this is done. And some people might want to actually know, So at first glance, it's pretty good. It gives you like a bed of nails almost, is what it looks like, of supports. But a lot of these are problematic to begin with. For example, you might get this thing printed back and say something like this one here is so close to the actual model that you're going to have this embedded into the model. I don't know if you can even see what I'm pointing at, but you're going to have these supports cemented into the model, and then you're going to have to sand them away or something crazy like that. You can see what the problem is, right? It's not a process you want to screw up. So one thing I do is I go through and add extra supports all over the place. Like, look at the strap right here. On his strap, it didn't add any right there. And so when this thing prints, this could look like melted spaghetti or melted cheese, right? It's going to look fucked up. So the last thing you want is that to be the case. So I'll go through and I'll add supports here and there. But the other thing I like to do is any of these supports that are near to the model, I will actually pull farther away. And I think you can kind of see it, right? You can just kind of pull it away from the model. This way, you know that it's not going to be melted into the model when you finish, right? Yeah, you can sort of see the it's not a one. It's not like Star Trek where you click the button, you say print it, and it prints. It's nothing like that. And that was one of the big wake up calls when I first started doing 3D printing. Was like, what the? This is crazy. So I'm going to go back to the one I saved, and then I'm going to continue working on it. It's actually pretty close to being ready to be printed. Again, yeah. So this one I printed last night, or the other day I printed them. He actually came out pretty damn good. I don't know if you can sort of see him. Yeah, there he is. Right. I mean, it came out pretty good. I didn't clean up the model. You can sort of see on here, there's a lot of the support still left, which you just break off, basically, is what you do. But this was more of a test to see what works and what is not working. Because a lot of times when you do 3D modeling, for example, the details that you put in, like it's like the details on the glove, right? The outlines on the glove, or like even like his hair, facial hair, right? You don't know if that's going to work or not. And what reads on your screen is not what reads on a miniature, right? So some things have to be over exaggerated to make sure that it's working and it looks correct. I mean, the way I do the hair on the 3D models is a way that I sort of come up with. I'm sure other 3D people have done it too, right? I mean, I'm not the first person to ever do it, but to make it, I like to make the hair thicker on the model, right? Like right there, right? You can, because when it prints like this, it paints really nice. And I know it's hard or difficult to see if with my camera or whatever, but you get the idea. So you sort of have to adjust. I like to adjust because realism is not going to print well. You want something that's going to print well and it's going to be easy for the person who buys the figure to go, yeah, that's the thing I wanted the whole time, All right, so let's go into. I'm going to go into. Okay. There's so many supports right now that it's taking time to get into the support mode so I can add them. One of the crazy bummers about that drives me up the wall about this software, okay, and if you use it for like 30 seconds, you would probably get freaked out too, is that you're moving around and you're actually you're zooming in and moving around and adding the things that you need. And when you rotate, because you have to rotate around it to see it, it's not rotating from the point where you are. It's actually rotating from the center of the model, right? So if I'm zoomed up like right here on the guy's shoulder, and I'm adding, let's see, if I want to add like a support here like this, or whatever, I want to rotate from that point. Just twist it, right? Just a twist. That's what I want to do. It makes it so much easier. And the way they do it, I have no idea why they do it this way. Maybe they want you to buy like the extra expensive software to do it, which I'm sure is part of it. But it drives you up the wall and it makes the whole thing take a long time. I'm just going to be honest. It's frustrating, right? So I'm going to add one here onto the mustache. Okay. There we go. This model of the guy from Walking Dead is the longest model I've ever worked on. I wanted to see if I could actually make something that people would like to buy. So I think, I'm going to do a ton of detail on this guy. And he's not like the Hulk, where you can just draw um, a something that resembles a humanoid that looks awesome. This is a realistic looking figure. So to make something like this, you have to have tons of detail. Um, I even put zippers and buttons, and in my mind, all of this stuff adds up to a person getting the figure and going, "This is really nice." This is what I want it to be. It's a culmination of things adding up to make it look awesome. So let's see. So yeah, so I put like the machete. I mean, the machete took, it looks done, right? I mean, so when it's done, you don't really care how long it took. It probably took 2 or 3 days, maybe 2 days to do the machete, right? And I'm just like, it's worth it because it's a kick-ass looking machete. Okay. And it's a feature, it's something you want to see on the guy's hip. It adds detail to the hip, right? It's just fun. I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? It's a no-brainer. So, but you got to do it right, and you got to do it in a way where people are going to react to it when they see it. So, yeah. So on the base, from the one people have seen on Twitter to this one, I have shrunken the base, and the terminus sign is protruding over the edge, right? And even Merle's arm is protruding over the edge of the base, and you have the mud dripping down the side, which is in the end, it's a better choice. It looks better, right? Having things contrary to what some people may think, I'm just going to say it out loud. Just like in comic books, when figures break borders or things of that nature, to me, that is a cool thing. It's a boundary breaker, and it breaks the dimension of something, and it makes it look way more dynamic. And it's not hard to do, right? It's not exactly like, geometry or something. It's just a thing you go, yep, that works. The second you see it, you go, yeah, that works. I'm doing it. So I normally spend about, to do a 3D figure for a client, I probably spent about 100 hours on a figure. And they came out for 100 hours. I charged $700. And for that, they look pretty damn good. They look really sweet. This one, I wanted to see what would happen if I took longer. Like, what would I get if I took 3 weeks, right? If I took 3 weeks on a figure, what exactly would it yield? Would I like the result? And yeah, I'm going to say it really paid off because you just have so many more details. Building this crossbow was crazy. It's a crazy thing you're not making a fantasy crossbow. You're not making something that is like, that could be anything, right? It has to be this guy's crossbow. And on the show, there are multiple crossbows. I think they don't all exactly look the same. They look similar, but they're not exactly the same. And so you have to go through them and find the one you like, right? And that is that's a challenge. I mean, I probably spent, again, 3 days just doing the crossbow. And stuff like this is odd. It's odd stuff to model. It isn't. It's like your sheet metal on your car. It looks simple, but when you get into it, it's actually designed out very, very well, and it has very particular dimensions and shapes to it that have to look a certain way. So yeah, it took a while, man. It took a while to do that crossbow, but I knew it would pay off. The other thing that you can't see on this model, because it's actually, maybe you can. Ooh, there we go. Uh, let's see. Here we go. Let's see if this actually works. They have this X-ray thing in here. You can sort of see it. You can sort of see the wings on his back. The wings on his back look. You can sort of see him, and the lighting's pretty not very good on this camera. So the wings on the back of his jacket seems like a simple thing, right? It seems like that's just a simple whatever, and it turned out not to be, and it turned out to be a ton of work. So yeah, I mean, it's a thing because he doesn't always have that wing on his back. And I thought, yeah, but that's cool. I mean, it's better than a backpack. I could have put a backpack on his back, but that's kind of nondescript and boring in my mind. You know, I like something where you would have something distinguishing about that character, right? I made so there's a ton of different knives on the show. Knives are like elbows. Everybody's got them, right? So I ended up kind of using a certain one I found on the show that I thought would be really cool. And it was turned out to be this. Like, it's a pretty big knife. You know, it's massive. It's almost the size of the machete on the side of his leg. But for a 3D figure, I think it's actually pretty cool to see the silhouette of him. Let me get rid of that. To see the silhouette of that right there, of that size of a knife. Because when I did a small one, it just didn't work. You know, you ended up going like, yeah, he's holding like a toothpick, right? It's either the toothpick or the cool thing. And I thought, okay, that's a no-brainer. Even I can figure that out. The cool thing is going to have to be the thing, right? So, yeah, I thought, well, for sure, you know, that's the way to do it. This is 3ds Max. This is where I sort of built him, the figure. A couple of times I printed the figure, and this was too thin when I printed it. So, yeah, so I had to go back, and it's one of the problems you have to deal with when you do 3D printing, right? Are you going to print something that's going to end up breaking when it's done? And you don't want that either. Another thing for 3D printing is if you can see how far this button's pulled out, right? But on something like this, that's not, you don't even see that feature. And I think that is a thing that I like to make it more pronounced than normal so that it reads when it prints. So yeah. One of the challenges with doing this figure was, unlike other things, when I did the Gem-Shock figure for Mandy, that was a big creative challenge for me because doing the figure and making a realistic face was something I had never really done that much, right? And so it's, you know, when it's done, it looks like it's all set, right? But let's see if I can show you, because I don't know if you saw Gem-Shock. Yeah, you can't even see it. You can't even see it. Right, forget that. Anyway, you get the idea. So when I did his face, I thought it's going to be challenging to get the likeness of this guy. It's, you know, when I do a 3D figure, hey, when I do a 3D figure, the way I don't buy stuff, and I'm sure most 3D sculptors, most of them don't, right? I'm going to show you really quick how I went about doing this. There we go. The way I do it is I start with a 3D box, and I'm going to take it into a sculpting program before this is my setup for that. But I basically and I do something to this effect. And then I do something kind of like this. This is actually pretty rudimentary. I don't really think you get, just so you get the idea, right? So I'll do something like this, where it's a box with, I don't know if you can see it, with holes for eyes in a mouth and whatnot, right? And then I'll do, okay. And then I'll do something like, let's see, like that. No, stop it, stop. Sometimes I'll do like, I'll realize, yeah, I'm gonna do a neck as a set. And then this is where I start. This is how I end up starting with the 3D model. And it turns into that, eventually it'll turn into that guy's face, right? As you can sort of see them right next to each other. And that's hard to see. Maybe I can turn on the clay thing. Yeah, I think it's a little easier to see like that, right? So let's see. So I'll add a nose. And you can do this and without doing this. I'm sure there's better ways to do it. You know, everybody has their own way they start out doing things. You know, some of them are bad. They're bad ways to do it. Some, you know, but they work. Let's see. I'll pull this into a 3D saw into Mudbox just to sort of show you the basic setup, the process. Actually, let's make this. Let's make this. Let's center it. Yeah, let's center it, the whole thing. And I'm going to send, we're going to go into Mudbox. These programs are set up together so that you can send one thing to another. And there you go. And you can see it pretty good. Yeah, it's a little light on the camera, but I guess that's okay. So then you just, you know what? Let me try one. Let me do one more thing, because I want to show you something pretty important here. When you work in 3D modeling, you can work in the mirror mode, and it ends up being pretty helpful. And you can't always do it because not all figures are actually standing straight forward, right? But this one, for this face, will be. There we go. So when you do, so the way I start out, you can see it's very simple model. It's got just boxes. And I'm going to well, before I do that, I'm just going to show you the basics. So you can grab onto models and, okay. I'm going to go into mirror mode. You can see the two different sides to it. You can grab one side and it pulls the other, right? Sort of get the idea. And a lot of people work that way. You can smooth things pretty quick like that. It's easier to see when you're closer, it looks like. So anyway, so you see how these are all there's like so many boxes across. I'm going to subdivide it. Now there's twice as many. And this way you can actually, it's easier to manipulate. So I'm going to just quickly get this to be a little bit more realistic. Well, realistic might be the wrong word, but start to resemble a figure, right? And a lot of 3D programs, like ZBrush, has its own way of making 3D geometry. Mudbox doesn't make, this version of Mudbox doesn't make 3D geometry. So, you know, You have to do what you got to do. So you get the idea, right? Yeah, there we go. So, like with the Walking Dead one I did, this is how I did the face. This is how I start with all my models. Um, in reality, you could, I mean, you could actually just purchase a primitive head or a primitive hand, right? Um, I, you know, there's something cool about making everything on your own and not actually being reliant on other people's work. That's kind of how I like to do it. If I was working for a company doing 3D models, what I would end up doing is I would make a bunch of generic heads like this that are all worked out, generic hands in different poses, right? That's what I would do. And then that way I could save time to get this stuff done. Because it doesn't really, time is really the issue. It's not a matter of your integrity as an artist. It really has more to do with just they want their thing done, and they want it done under a deadline. So, I would do something like that, right? This guy looks like a total freak, right? So I'm smoothing it a little bit. And getting, one of the hardest parts is just getting the proportions. Quite honestly, just getting the proportions correct takes you a long time, right? And I know that it seems like everything looks great when it's done, but 2D artists that like when we draw our comic books, it takes a long time, to get to the point where you're good at doing that. If you watch like a stream where you watch Ethan draw or whatever, he's taking it to a different level because he is doing it. He's done this so many times that it's a waste of time for him to draw everything out with a pencil and then start inking and shade everything and then start inking, right? So, yeah, there's always a preliminary point where this takes time. It just takes time. And people like to think, hey, it's 3D, so 3D is so easy, it's going to replace everything, or, it's not really equal to 2D or something. Everything is made by hand. This is made by hand, right? You get the idea of the 3D right there. Let's see. This guy, every part of him is made by hand, right? None of it is actually something that I purchased or I found somewhere 3D, right? This thumbnails were made of boxes, just like with the head and everything. And then you kind of just go to town. So yeah, so that's kind of how to always. So here is his back. Let's see if you can see it. Kind of hard to see. So if you this is kind of how I like to rotate stuff, right? When you're zooming around and working on a model, right? The way they have it in the 3D printing software is that even if you're over here, you're always moving like from the center. So if you unlike this, if you do this and you do that, see how nice that is. To me, that is the way these people should have done it, and I have no idea why they didn't do it that way. I'm just, so. But yeah, so doing things like I wanted to give him like a mean and lean look, right? I wanted him to look fearful and aggressive at the same time, because that's kind of how I think about the people on the show, right? Unless you're somebody like Negan, who's a total psychopath, which there are those in the show. Unless you're somebody like that, you're like a normal person trying to survive. So getting that in the 3D model takes work, and it takes doing it and going, you know what? That's not right. The way I did that there, that's not correct. It's not working. It's not enough. And when you draw comic books, it's the same thing. You end up drawing stuff and you end up scrapping it, right? When I worked on my comic book Shadowpunk, I did multiple pages. I did a couple pages that I ended up doing and then saying, you know what, this is not gonna. It works, but it isn't gonna work for the story, and I have to redo the story to make the story better. And that's just the territory of being an artist, I suppose. These green things are just helpers. You don't really need to see those. They're helpers. You can basically link. I'm not sure what this is. Maybe the eyes. All the links are all gone. Like I linked everything to this right here for the crossbow, because you can imagine, as you can see from that right there, there's a ton of separate single objects in that crossbow, right? So I'm like, if I ever want to move it or adjust it so it fits in his hand correctly, I'm not gonna want to go like this and grab every single thing. And every time I change my mind, I have to do it again, right? It's better to do something like this where you go, this one thing they're all linked to this one thing. So that's pretty standard 3D stuff, but the standard stuff works. It works, so why not do it? Anyway, okay. So back to the 3D software, printing software. So when I end up getting it printed, these supports are going to be almost like thin, hard spaghetti, because they're actually, the ones I have here are thin. So they're not hard to get rid of, right? All you do is end up with your finger just pulling them apart. You got to be careful when you do that stuff. And I'm sure all the 3D people will figure, it's a lesson that you learn, right? Is that you don't, when you're dealing with thin things like the string on his crossbow, the last thing you want to do is print this for 12 hours and then and it looks great, and then you start taking away all these supports and you break it, right? I mean, that sucks. And I've done that. And it's a lesson that you have to learn, right? So yeah, it's something you just got to be careful about when you're doing 3D. Ethan was talking the other night about building toys, and he was saying that you can't do that stuff in the United States right now because it's too expensive. And to a large degree, he makes a pretty good point. That is changing over time. That will change over time. The 3D printers are being, like the one I've got is a really good one. But there's ones that are almost twice as fast as the one I bought 2 years ago. And the materials are changing too. The materials are, like when I first printed my Shadowpunk figure, some of the people got them broken. They got figures like this that were broken because in the mail they got broke, right? And the material's fragile and brittle compared to something like PVC, right? But now they have material that is actually bendable. So I could, on the other new material, you could actually bend her foot and it wouldn't break. And that's a huge step forward. So that's changing. So there is going to be a time when we're going to be able to make large scale orders for 3D toys for people. It's just a matter of time. The other issue is the painting. And that's also a factor. I mean, the painting is a thing that I like to paint my figures. When I sold them, I painted my figures, but I didn't paint them like like the way, say, like the Cyber Frog toys painted, right? Where it actually looks resembling close to the comic book thing, right? That's hard to do because that takes a ton of time. And he's right. You got to pay some person in China who can afford to live in China on that wage to paint that thing, because otherwise you're just not going to be able to do it. And the painting thing is a big deal. There are 3D printers now. The filament, there's two kinds of printers. There's a resin printing, and then there's a filament printing. The resin printing is like a vat of liquid, which is what I got. And the vat of liquid gets filled up with the resin and hardens it one layer at a time. The filament printer is more like what you might imagine, where it's like it prints a thing on a base. Those you're able to do multicolor things on there now. So you could do. I want to do. I think I think the way they do it is they do like it's like you have each spool is a particular color and they don't mix. So you would have a red spool, a blue spool, maybe a black spool. And so you would pick those three colors. And then when you print your model, you could choose anything on that model to be one of those three colors. I think that's the way it is now. I could be wrong. I mean, I'm not up to all the stuff, but I could be wrong. And to me, it's just a matter of time to where that filament gets mixed, right? Where you end up being. So once that happens, this guy, I could color him in 3D software, and then you could print your character, and it would be full color. That's going to happen because if I can figure it out, I'm sure people figured it out years ago how to do it, and they're in the process of rolling that out. Okay, so once that happens, then it may be still cheaper to do it in China, but you will be able to do it in the United States. When I did my Shadowpunk campaign, I sold my figures with my thing, right? I sold my Shadowpunk figure with my campaign. So you can do it. One of the reasons I was able to do it was because I do the printing and the 3D all myself, right? You don't have to pay somebody to do it. And that is a big price. I mean, to me, that is, I'm a rare instance of being able to do it, but that's going to end up changing too. You know, I would actually like to do this service for people, for other creators, the modeling and the 3D printing. But the problem is the 3D printing is problematic right now. And it's, you know, there are people that are excellent 3D printers, and you need to get somebody like that instead of me, who is an artist who is 3D printing for the purpose of just doing my figure, right? So maybe one day. I mean, maybe one day I would end up doing it for people, but today is not that day because doing the creative work is time consuming enough. And I can't delve into spending my life doing 3D printing for people, right? And then let's say I end up doing it. Let's say I end up making money doing it, right? And then I end up doing it for a couple of years, and I'm making money or whatever. But I'm not an artist anymore, right? I'm just a printer, and I don't. That's a decision you have to sort of make on your own if that's what you want. I don't. I want to be an artist. I want to spend my time creating artwork. I don't want to be, a printer, which is a great thing. But other people can do that. And also it's a different mentality with people. Creative people are dreamers. We're dreamers, right? That's what it is. Printers. There are a lot of creative people that are like this, but I'm not like this. I'm not a technical person, so I only learn what I have to learn, if that makes sense. I mean, why would I spend my time learning, anything that I don't have to? I want to do creative stuff. So I only learn what I have to learn to do my figures. And it is, the 3D software is pretty complicated. So you can say that I'm not a technical person and I know how to run 3D software, and you say that's kind of a contradiction or oxymoron or whatever. But it is what it is. That's the nature of how things are working right now. So I learn what I have to learn to get done when I have to get done. All right. So let's see. Wow, I got 51 people watching. What the heck is going on? Wow, fuck. Okay. Right. And hopefully when you're watching this, you're not getting dizzy by looking at this figure, looking at me rotate around and everything. But it kind of has to be done. You have to get in there and really mess with it. So I would say this guy looks pretty good. I think the supports are set up really well. I see how close this support is. This guy here is too close. Like I said, I don't want him to print and be melded into the actual 3D figure, because that will happen, and that has happened. Right? Pull these away. I want to pull these a little. See, this one won't. This one here is fundamental, so it won't pull away. Right, and you guys are getting vertigo just watching me do this, but that's okay. There we go. There we go. This software comes free with the 3D printer, so it took a while to sort of figure it out. No, stop. But it's not that complicated. It's just dealing with the issues that come from it, right? It's going to have weird things about it, and they're not always fun to deal with. So, I mean, because you can't really deal with anything until you do it, right? So, spending all the time on a 3D model. So, yeah, so just so people understand the process, I spent, maybe a couple hours this morning setting this one up. I've done it multiple times with this figure, because I've been printing them and trying to get them to print correctly. If I decided, hey, I want to change that thing on the crossbow, or I want to add this thing on the 3D model, you have to do it all over again. You can't plug it in and say use the old supports, right? So every time you've changed something on the 3D model, you have to go through the process of doing all of that again. So, take it for what it's worth. It's just part of the process. There we go. He looks pretty good. Fingers crossed. You know what? That's not true. That's not true. This crossbow. This crossbow needs some more. Right? You get it. You see what I'm doing. I don't. So the other day I found this game-changing thing I can do here. And for people that don't do it, it doesn't really matter in your world. But so I was able to figure out that I can take this one support, and if I double click on it, I can add supports stemming from it. And anybody that's watching this right now that's done 3D printing is like, you didn't know that? I'm like, dude, I had no idea that I could do that. But for, you learn as you go. And this is kind of a game changer for me. So that way you don't have to have, because right now, as you can, I'm going to show you right now, just so you can sort of see. You can sort of see these supports. Some of them plug into. They don't go to the ground. They plug into the guy, to a part of the surface of the geometry below him. And you want as little as possible of that, because this is going to create a tiny, tiny, tiny little bump. But those bumps add up, and you don't want them. And so if you can avoid them, so if I can have, instead of having 30 supports coming out of this jacket, I can have 2, and then they can sprout more from that one. And once I realized that, I'm like, that's exactly what I need. So see if I can straighten him up a little bit. Yeah, there we go. I mean, I guess the back of this could have some. Yeah, the back of that needs it. And this is not a science, right? Sometimes I wonder how exactly this, is there why isn't it a science? You know, um, because I'm kind of just guessing what I need, like, how many supports do you need to make this thing print correctly? And it's not a science. You don't really know. You just have to sort of try it and do it. Like this right there, that's probably good, right? It's probably good. All right. So let's call this done. Let's call this completed as far as setup goes. Um, First thing I'm going to do is not do that. I'm going to save it. Stop. I'm going to save it. And then what I'm going to do is slice it. And it sounds more dramatic than it is, the slicing process. But that's what they call it in 3D printing. So what you do is you're going to tell the 3D printer that I want to slice this into, each layer is going to be a certain thickness, right? From the bottom, like a stack of pancakes. So if your pancakes are super thick, you can fit 4 in an inch or something, right? But if your pancakes are extremely thin, you can do 150 in an inch. And so the thinner those layers are, the less steppy your model is going to look. And the idea is, just like a high-res Photoshop file or a JPEG, you want to have as many steps in there as possible to blend, so they blend together and you don't see any steps at all. So I want to double check here. So this is a setup for, tells you which machine you're using, which mine's the Elegoo Saturn II. It's a resin. So I'm going to go 0.04. 0.04 is going to tell you what each thickness of each layer is going to be. And so, yeah, that's kind of my chosen. Sometimes if I'm doing something like when I did the crossbow, I think I did it at 0.6 because I didn't want to spend a lot of time. I just wanted to see if this was good enough to print at this size, and it was. Right. So now here's how you do the slicing process. It's going to go through and create each of those individual layers. And it's going to, you probably, I don't know if you can see, you can't see at the bottom. Right now, you'll see a bar go across the screen eventually. There you go, right outside of my title thing. And it's going to, this is how long the process takes to slice it. The cool thing about 3D printing, though, is that theoretically, once you get this process set up, you can print as many as that process is done. Now you can print as many as you want, right? So all things being equal, it'll work and you'll be able to, produce 50 of them or 100 of them or whatever your thing is, right? 10 limited edition versions or something like that. Who knows, but that's one of the cool things about 3D printing, is that it's mass production friendly, right? But yeah, so it was a lot of fun making this 3D figure. I want to do a Batman figure. I'm gonna, I really want to do one because I think I can make a pretty cool Batman figure. And I even did one Batman figure, and I don't think I'm going to use it because I've realized I don't want it to be that way. But I will show you while we're waiting for that thing to slice. This was a Batman figure I started on a while ago. There's a lot about it I do like, right? You can sort of see my basic building blocks that I set up. Excuse me. Printing a 3D print that is this big is just crazy. And I think there's better poses for Batman too, right? I don't think this is going to be the one I want to do, but it was good to do. I mean, I spent days on this, and it was good for me to go through the process to rule out what I don't want to do, right? So obviously, using the cape as a dramatic element is really super important for this character because not everybody has that. And when you make your characters dynamic, they end up, you can use, like when I did my Shadowpunk figure, her wings kind of wrap around her. And that to me is a dramatic element, right? But with Batman, it's cool to have a cloak in a way that you can just do so many things with it. And the trick is not to make it giant, because if people are gonna want to one day buy a figure that's a Batman figure, the last thing you want to do is spend $60,000, so hyperbolically $60 billion printing 3D cloaks, right? It's gonna cost you arm and a leg to print something that large. So so I don't want to do that. And I don't know exactly what it's going to be. I thought about doing the Dark Knight Batman. I did do one a long time ago. I can show it to you guys. I might do a version of this at some point. Actually, with the one I didn't finish, that I'm in the process of maybe finishing one day, is my Dark Knight Robin one, which actually I made it for a HeroClick to pre-printed it, half, like 3/4 of an inch size, and that ended up not. That's fine, but that's not good enough for like a larger miniature. You need more detail than what I put on there. So this is my Dark Knight Robin figure. And she came out pretty good. There's still things I want to change about it. But it's like 50% right now of what it should be. So let's see. Show you that. So the Batman one I did do was the Dark Knight in the armor from the comic book, from the cover of the comic book. Okay. Here we go. And this was based mostly off of only the silhouette of Batman, The Dark Knight Returns #4. And this, I did him quite a long time ago. I mean, the level of detail would have to, you can't even see it. Hold on. There we go. There we go. The level of detail in this figure would have to be 3 times as much. I mean, if I'm going to end up doing something like that, I would make this gun as realistic as the crossbow I did on The Walking Dead, because it's going to be printed larger, and you're going to want to see all that detail. You're going to want to go, whoa, that is fucking kick-ass. And this works for a HeroClick that's 1 inch tall, right? I mean, when you're doing something 1 inch, you end up, you throw away detail if you do all that work, right? Plus, when I did this, I was sort of in the early stages of learning how to 3D model, if that makes sense. Yeah, so I might end up doing him. I'm not sure. But I would like to do like a really kick-ass, what you would call standard Batman. And I don't know what that's going to actually be, because I want him on the ground. I've debated whether or not he would be jumping in the air. which is possible. But when you jump in the air, you end up having something like a bait, like a connector to the actual figure like that, right? So, which is cool, which is not a bad thing, but it's an extra element added on to the character. And so it's a trick. It's a tricky thing with characters that are off the ground, and you have to find a way to make that look natural. I mean, originally she was like I was gonna buy glass thin rods, right? But this became more dynamic, and it made more sense. But you know, so yeah, so a Batman that is in the process of a kick or something like that would be pretty cool. Uh, Another good example of this, and I did this one a while ago, was the Cyberfrog one. Um, okay, stop. I've done so many figures. Um, uh, so he is up in the air, right? So for him, it's very inconspicuous to see this one support, right? And because this character is not like the Hulk, where he's heavy, like the 3D model isn't going to be a heavy model. So one support's easy for this guy, right? If this guy was, you know, if a person was going to make something like this and print it to be large, I would add twice the amount of detail on this, right? There's some detail on there. I mean, there's like his gizmos in his throat or whatever, you know. And but either way, more detail. I'll show you one that's kind of more detail. The Salamandroid one I did for Ethan. I did that quite a while ago. He was one of the first ones I did actually. Let's see. I'll try that one. He was so. When I do a 3D figure for a person for their character, my goal is to make their character look as awesome as possible, right? And they've already done a lot of that work to make that happen. My job when I do a 3D figure would be to capture what they've already done. If I don't do that, then I kind of failed. This is the Salamandroid one. I'm sure a lot of you guys have probably already seen it before. But there's a ton of detail on this guy. Let's get rid of that. There's a shitload of detail on him. And the cool thing so this was from one panel from Cyberfrog Blood Honey. Okay. And it was where he's fighting the Visps, and picks up the car and smashes them, right? And I went through the book and I thought, you know, this is, I need a dynamic pose, right? And I think in the comic book, it's probably something like, I'm guessing because I can't remember exactly. It's something like that, right? Where it's cropped to that degree. The angles are different. The way he did is different, obviously. But I said, that's it. That's the most exciting thing right there. Right there is that's awesome. And so that's the first step is deciding which is the best pose. Because I think getting the pose is super important. And the idea that you make it something static is stupid. I mean, to me, it's anybody can do that. You've got to be able to catch the figure in motion while it's doing its thing, right? You can sort of see. I don't know if I embellished more some of the features like the spikes on the back. I don't know if they're that big or not, but the design is so cool because it combines organic and non-organic shapes. So metal versus skin, right? And so when you do a 3D model and those are both in there, it really works. It comes off crazy awesome. When everything is the same, you've got to resort to doing other things to make it look dramatic, right? And everything's pulled out of the toolkit when you're doing something, but it's you love it when you see it. You're like, yeah, that guy is going to be really cool because he has so much going on in the figure. The hardest thing to make on this guy was these shoulders. And you're thinking, what? Well, why would that be so hard? It looks great when you draw it because it makes sense when you draw things 2D. It's right there. That's what it is. It's not real, right? When you do something in 3D, it's got to be real because you're going to end up making it. So it's got this bizarre architecture around these little shapes with these grooves, and it looks simple. I'm telling you, it looks simple to you looking at the screen right now because it's all done. But I pulled out a lot of hair trying to figure out what exactly that is and how does it work. Yeah, I mean, this guy here, I could probably add twice the amount of detail now, right? Because you would print him to be, 8 inches tall or something or whatever. If someday they wanted to make these or something. And now I would put like a skin texture, reptile texture on his skin or whatever, I mean, all that stuff would totally pay off. The car really came out cool because it's like the front chunk of the car, right? And I mean, that's a cool. It's not the whole car. It looks like a whole different shape. And I decided when I was doing it that if I made realistic tires, that it wouldn't read very well. This is a good example of what I was talking about earlier. I made them super knobby, the wheels, because when you do the 3D print, it looks way better. And you don't look at it like that's like a cartoon version wheel or something. You don't even question it. That's how good it looks. And so I was like, and some of the stuff I did this a few years ago. So I mean, these features in the car they're pretty basic. I didn't make them too crazy. I mean, but they read really very well when you do the 3D printing of it, so yeah, so he was fun. He was good to do. And this is another example of where you have to have like a post or something to support the character so that otherwise you can't use that pose. You've got to have something connecting him to the base, right? So there's probably other ways you can do it. You probably could print him without it and then use a different thing to connect them to a base. You could do something like a rod or something, even like a bendable spring or something, right? Which is totally different. Nobody really does that, right? Because these things are fragile, resin's fragile, to some degree, or it used to be. So yeah. So that is the Salamandroid, and some of the characters that are really exciting, that are fun to make, have just a lot of gizmos and stuff on them, right? I did this recent commission for this guy, and this guy is called Phenomenon. No, the book is called Phenomenon. And this guy is called the Boss. Anyway, he had he gave me, to make the character, he wanted particular weapons done for this character. Like one of them would be this gun, right? This is an actual type of gun, a real gun. And this pistol was an actual pistol, right? So he's going to be printed pretty small. He's not going to be printed 12 inches tall, right? He's going to be, I'm guessing he'll print him 4 inches or something, right? So I'm not going to spend my entire life doing everything, but I do want it to be accurate. And, I want it to read as that gun and look really cool. And so this guy is he's a terrorist, I guess, of sorts, but he's not a bad guy. And getting that initial pose is super important. So we worked on it. I worked on it for a long time, and I sent it to Patrick. And I think I really nailed it, because I think that the pose is an opportunity. It's not a thing you have to work. It's not a problem, right? It's an opportunity. It's like, wow, the pose is going to give the spirit of the character and their intention and their motives right away. So it's a super, super cool design, right? And I got to make like grenades for this guy, which are totally cool. I got to make like weapons. Patrick doesn't know this, but this is like a real knife. I made like a separate knife holder for the thing, right? And his belt is like a really unique looking belt. And it got this cool wicked shape, right? I don't know if you can see it, something like that. And the boots took forever. They took forever. They are so complicated, right? They look great when they're done, but man, right now they are complicated. Yeah. And I was able to do one to a certain degree, and then they were different. They're bent different. So I had to literally hand mold them to be the right angle and the right stretch and everything, which is fun to do, but it's a lot of work, and then this is the Soviet manhole cover. Give you an idea about his comic book. I believe, don't quote me, I believe he's a terrorist inside the Soviet Union. I'm not totally sure about the story, because I don't want to give away anything that shouldn't be given away. But either way, he looks pretty kick-ass. And the design that they came up with was great. When he sent me the artwork, I was like, you know what? Hell yeah, that is a character that I can dramatize and make look awesome, because all the elements are there. He's already designed them. He's already made them, drawn them, and everything. So the book sounds awesome. I don't know if you guys know Patrick Quinlan, but he'll be doing his thing at some point. I'm not sure, but yeah. So anyway, when I first started doing 3D, this is going to sound crazy. I'll show you the first 3D model I ever made. And let's see. So this is the first one I ever made. Let me get rid of that. There we go. I wanted to make a Hulk HeroClick. I thought, how do you even do it, right? My buddy's like, yeah, why don't you just make one? And I'm like, make one? What does that even mean? I don't, how, you can make one. Yeah, you can make one. I'm like, really? And he knew I did 3D. I think he kind of had a feeling I could do it. He's like probably like trying to egg me on to see if I can, see what he can come up with. And so when I first started 3D modeling, I could do it right away. I have no idea why that is. Okay. I started modeling this guy right here. He's symmetrical, by the way. His upper body's symmetrical, which made it easier. But I knew it just worked. I knew exactly how to do it. I knew anatomy from going to art school, right? I took anatomy. And so obviously I been drawing and writing and reading comics my whole life. So, but it came super natural. It wasn't a process I had to struggle with to get um, a grasp of. I knew how to do 3D modeling and sculpting, bang, right away. So, oh yeah, there we go. That's originally those are the original shapes I made from that Hulk, right? This is kind of how when I do a model, I will make a character like this and I will pose him in a bunch of different ways, and that way I'll find the best pose because there's a lot of different poses you can do. You know, there's a zillion. I mean, the Hulk is so simple, but there's a zillion different poses you can do. So I'll build a figure that I can pose like this that helps me figure out what the right pose is. And it's just a starter, to rule out things, but it definitely is a big. If there's a different way to do it, I'd like to know. When I ended up first doing 3D printing, I would send this to a online company and they would print it for me, and it would cost me like $40 to do like a guy that's like 1.5 inches tall, right? $40. So at some point, I really got sick and tired of doing that. And I got to save this, by the way. I ended up buying my own 3D printer right about the time I started working on my book, my Shadowpunk book. I was like, you know what? This is ridiculous. I'm not going to be able to sell them on my campaign unless I can print them myself, right? Because otherwise, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. That's fucking crazy. So, right, the writing process is going to take a while here. You can't see it, but it's going to take a while. Let me see if I can. Right. So anyway, it was a game changer. Doing the 3D printing myself, and because I already knew how to do the modeling, the 3D printing was a game changer. And so that's how I can make something like this, right? And I'm like, wow, it's already, it's in my hand. That thing is in my hand. And that's a pretty cool deal. Just to be able to make your own thing or whatever. I'm debating how I'm going to paint these because if people want one, I'm going to sell them. This is painted by hand, and I might try to do airbrushing. Both work, but I want to see the difference. This guy's just, I don't need him anymore. But it is what it is. He served his purpose, right? So anyway, thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate it. It's nice to see 56 people actually care about 3D printing and CG. CG is awesome. A lot of cool people. I hope that down the road, more 3D stuff is done for people. And people give 3D a bad rap, but I'm just here to tell you it's all done by hand, and it's not. It's actually an awesome thing. It's a thing that adds to the comic books. So So anyway, thanks for tuning in. 58 people now watching the show. I don't think that's 58 people on YouTube. I think that might be 58 people on Twitter. Now it's actually counting the people on Twitter or something. I don't know. 58 people. That's a ton. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Yeah, that's what it is. It's 50. Wow, that's craziness. That's craziness. Anyway, I'll give you guys an update on this figure. I'm hoping that tonight I can print this Walking Dead guy, Daryl Dixon, and I'm hoping that it'll print correctly, right? I don't know if I'll paint them before I show them. I might show them before then. Um, but it's the biggest, most detailed figure I've ever done. I've never done anything that's this size, right? And if you get an idea of a bottle of water, that's how big the figure is, right? So I've never done anything like that. And so I like to, personally, I like to push my boundaries as far as possible. And in terms of like, how much detail, how large can I get it, right? How much better can the sculpt be? Every single time someone hires me for something like this, that's what I'm doing. Is I'm actually pushing my creative boundaries on a regular basis. I'm sure. I think everybody kind of does that. To be honest with you, I think all CG people are artists. At least are people that push. Always try to make their best stuff. 100%. And I think, and I do the same thing. So anyway, 60 people watching. I appreciate you guys for showing up. I'm gonna be on tomorrow at some point. Maybe tomorrow night, and I'm going to show the actual 3D print of this guy. So yeah, anyway, I guess that's it. Over and out. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.